everybody, Charles here at the LA Bread Lab, and this week we're going to do something really fun. We're going to make pizza together. Pizza is something really great to make, not only because it's so delicious and because the kids love it, but because it lets you take all those little tidbits and odds and ends of leftovers that are floating around your fridge that it's kind of hard to figure out what to do with, and use it in a way that seems exciting and delicious and a real change of pace. So let's get started. Making pizza is really easy when it comes to the ingredients because there really aren't a lot of them. We're going to be making 3 pounds of pizza dough. To do that, we need 783 grams of bread flour, 548 grams of water, 8 grams of salt, 8 grams of yeast, and 16 grams of olive oil, which I measured to be about 17 grams because when you pour it out, there's always 1 or 2 grams that stick in the container, and that lets you be accurate. Also, notice that I measured all of these things out separately. When you're a beginner, this is a great thing to do, so that if you've measured your water correctly and then you measure your oil into your water and you make a mistake, you don't have to throw the whole thing out. I'm going to throw that recipe up on screen now so that you can take a few minutes to write it down. All right, now we need to combine everything. First, I'm going to add the yeast that I measured directly to the flour like we talked about. You can do that with instant yeast. If you're using active dry yeast instead of instant yeast, add it to the water, not the flour, and let it dissolve for about 5 minutes. Also, add a bit more, 10 grams instead of just 8 grams. And then I'm going to add the oil to the water. Shake it, shake it, shake it, get it all out as best you can. You're gonna have that, see, there's that 1 gram or so still stuck, so it was really good that we added a little extra. The salt we're gonna put in later. So first, we're gonna just take our flour and just dump it in. And we're gonna turn it on to speed 2. And you can see that very quickly it comes together in what we call shaggy mass. And the motor sounds a little bit like it's working, and that's enough. We're just going to turn it off, and now I'm going to tilt it back. And this is what we call shaggy mass. So we're going to take the paddle off and scrape everything we can off the paddle. Now we're going to cover it with a tea towel and let that sit for 30 minutes. That's what we call the autolyse. And what's happening here is the proteins in the flour, what we call the gluten, is starting to form and tangle even without moving it around. Just sitting and letting the water do its work hydrates the dough and helps that gluten structure form in the beginning so that our kneading that we do later can be more efficient. See you in a half an hour. All right, so 30 minutes have gone by, and look at the difference already, right? Like this is a lot more recognizable as a dough, right? And that's just the action of the water sitting during the autolyse section. Now, this is our dough hook. We're going to be switching to this. Something to be aware of, especially with these sticky, strong doughs that are made with bread flour, is they have a tendency to climb up and climb over and get into the works. And that's really bad. We don't want that to happen. So what I like to do is take one of these air pump oil sprayers, just pump it up. You can always just put some oil on a paper towel as well and wipe it on. And what I do is I just spray some oil on that flange. Let's put that on here. Put it down, lock it. Always remember to lock it. And this time we're going to go, just like before, we're going to go up to speed 2. Speed 2 is your maximum when mixing dough in a KitchenAid because you don't want to overtax the motor. And we're going to let that go for 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, now about 2 or 3 minutes have gone by, and it's time to add the salt. We wait to add the salt so that it doesn't inhibit the yeast in the beginning and helps tighten the dough now. And that's just about 7 minutes. So let's see what we got. Oh, that's really beautiful. You see how it's got a nice soft quality? It's kind of dripping off the hook. That's the action of the olive oil. That's what we call a conditioner. So it's super critical that we're going to be able to get the dough back out of the rising vessel. You can use a bowl. I like to use these things. They're called Cambros, and they got convenient little numbers on the side, and you can see the dough rise. All you have to do is get some spray oil. You can even take some oil and put it on a rag, and just put some oil in the Cambro so we can get it back out. And now we can just get that dough out of the bowl. Now, when getting it out of the bowl, don't bother like trying to hold it like this. Just grab it and turn it right upside down. And now you can just scrape it very easily out of the bowl and let it pour itself boop, right into the Cambro. Now, it's kind of important that it's even in the Cambro because otherwise you can't tell what level it is. So just use your hand, punch it down. That's pretty good. So what's that at? It should be, this recipe should be just about 1 liter, 1 liter of dough. Great. So we're going to let this rise now until it's doubled. And of course, something that's really important is to put a lid on this so that it doesn't dry out. Now, if you aren't using a Cambro, you can also just put a tea towel over it or plastic wrap or what have you. All right, about an hour has gone by now, and you can see that it used to be only a liter, and now it's all the way up to 2 liters. We've got all these beautiful holes and pockets that shows that the dough has risen. That's formed by the gas that the yeast has given off. So now what it's time to do is to get this dough out of the Cambro and onto our board so that we can shape it. I'm going to take this dough scraper. It's a nice flexible plastic dough scraper, and it's great for getting things like this out of the Cambro. We're going to try not to beat it up too much. You don't have to be super careful, but we're going to try to not lose so much of that gas. And as you can see, this dough scraper is really good at getting in there, just peeling it away from the side of the Cambro. So now we're going to scooch it out, and it's going to go right down on the board. And just look how beautiful and stretchy that dough is. That's just what you want with pizza dough. Look at how supple and beautiful that dough has become. This is some great stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is form this into a big ball that we can use to divide into the 4 pizzas that we're eventually going to make. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little flour on the top, and then we're going to make sure it's loose and flip it over. Oh, she's behaving really beautifully. And now I've grabbed it and inverted it, and now it's flour on this side and flour on that side. And then we're going to fold it this way, fold it this way, and then pick the whole thing up and move it over and turn it over onto the non-floured side of the board. Now here it's kind of sticky, which is what we want. Ooh, look at those beautiful bubbles that are coming up. This is the kind of bubbly, balloony texture that makes the edge of your pizza all crusty and bubbly and have those big holes inside. That makes it taste so good. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to slowly twist it and turn it. I'm always turning in the same direction. And you'll feel that the bottom is stuck to the board. And as we turn it, you see tension is building up, and it's turning into a nice, tight ball. We want this tension because it helps create a tight crumb that eventually will turn into like all the little holes that will blow up like a balloon when this thing rises. All right, nice and tight. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna divide this into 4 pieces, right? 4 3/4 pound pieces. Now you could use a scale, and sometimes I do, but this time it's just a circle and we're just gonna divide it in 4 pieces, so it should be pretty easy. So I'm gonna cut straight down and divide in half, and then scrape under, make sure they're separated, and then cut straight down. And, oh, this one's a little stickier, that's all right. And then straight down and pull them apart, right? Now, take a look at them. Sometimes they're not exactly even. That guy looks a little tiny and that guy looks a little big, so no problem. Just cut a little piece off and stick them on there. Now, again, a little flour on your hands, and what we're going to do is we're going to roll these using a 2-handed technique where what I'm doing is I'm making a space that's a little bit bigger than the ball, and I'm rolling the ball around and around, still stuck to the board, around that space until it gets really tight. Look at that, like magic. One of the things I love most about baking is this transformation that happens. We started with like powder and water, and then it turned into like a gloppy mess, and then it became sticky, and now with just a few elegant movements, we're making something that's just absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to show you how to freeze 3 of these, and then we're going to bake 1 more. All right, now to freeze these, we're going to want to wrap them in parchment, and then we're going to put them in one of these Ziploc bags so that they don't get freezer burned and they don't stick to everything in the freezer. So this is really easy. You don't need a lot of parchment because you're going to roll it up. All the parchment is doing is keeping it from sticking to the bag. And we're just going to put a very light coat of oil on the parchment. It's parchment, I know it doesn't stick too much, but it just helps get it off. You're going to lay it there, over, and over, and then you're going to take your plastic bag and just lay it in there. To use frozen dough, it's really easy. Just let it sit on the counter for about 2 hours until it's thoroughly defrosted, then stretch it and bake it as normal. You can fit probably all 4 of these in there as long as they're not touching each other. That's what the parchment does. So I'm going to go ahead and get these other 2 in, and meanwhile I'm going to lay this tea towel over one of them and let it rest for 30 minutes, and when we come back we'll roll it out and bake it. Stretching out all the dough and finding and preparing our toppings is going to take a little while. So now's the perfect time to get our oven hot, because that's going to take a little while too. Pizza cooks at really high temperature, so I'm going to get my oven as hot as it'll go. For me, it's 550. For you, it's whatever your oven can do. So you can see I've got baking stones in my oven, and I've got 2 of them, which I like so that the pizza can cook on the hot surface below and also be kind of roasted from above by the heat coming off the other stone. Now, I recommend you get at least 1 baking stone and cook on that. The pizza needs something heavy and thick to cook on that provides even heat. You can get them at a houseware store like Bed Bath & Beyond. You can also get them online. Something that you have to remember though is that the oven is going to get hot faster than those stones will. So when the oven reports that it's at temperature, give it about another 15 or 20 minutes before you start baking. If you just can't get your hands on a baking sheet, don't worry, it's not all lost. You can use a cookie sheet. Just expect your pizza to take a little bit longer to cook and to not be quite as crisp. So we did pretty well in our shopping trip in our own fridge. We found some odds and ends, and this is what we're going to use. Pizza, I always think of as starting with the cheese. You want to put the cheese down first, and we had some string cheese, which is great. We had some full-fat string cheese, which is my favorite, and that's just mozzarella, and that's classic. I like to mix a sharper, more flavorful cheese with the mozzarella. This is raclette, which is kind of stinky, and I'm into that. You may not be. You might want to get some aged Gouda or even cheddar. That's fine. And raclette's a nice melty cheese too. Fontina is great for this, or Gruyere is great for this. And then I like to add something with salt. That's pecorino. Pecorino is a really salty cheese. It doesn't melt that well, so you only put a little bit in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix those all around, and that's going to be my base. We got some mushrooms, we got some asparagus, and I trimmed out the tails of the asparagus. A lot of people just break that off and throw it away. Now's not the time to be wasting food, guys, so trim up your asparagus. We got some crushed garlic. I put a little olive oil on that so it doesn't get brown while we're doing all our other stuff. And then some fresh rosemary. We have this great neighbor who puts shears out and says, take as much as you like off the bush. All right, so 30 minutes have gone by, and there's our beautiful little dough. And if you take a look, there's some things we're looking for. It's relaxed, it's not standing up as high as it was, and it's nice and moist because it was covered up, and it's spread out a little bit, right? It's a little bit tacky, and that's good. It's really ready to handle. So the first thing we're going to do, as usual, let's get ourselves a little flour, put it right here, and let's get our hands a little floury. Now, at this point, we're going to use flour pretty liberally, because what we're going to do by stretching out this dough is make it into a pizza, and we don't want it sticking to stuff. Handy dandy dough scraper. Yeah, nice and stuck to the board. That's great. And let's flip her over right there on the flour. And now let's turn her over. Let's get her floured on both sides. Now, you might have a relative who's an expert pizza stretcher, or you might be an expert pizza stretcher, or your friend, and they're gonna look at this video and they're gonna say, that's not how you do it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not a professional pizzaiolo. I don't throw it up in the air or do that thing where you got the two fists and boom, 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 and you got a pizza. I do okay. And I think, you know, that's actually pretty good for an instructional video like this, right? Because you can find out how I do it. What's important to me is that I get an even round stretch. And so what I do is I start by going around and just gently stretching it out at the edges. A lot of people pick it up and start yanking it, and that's how you get a big, long, oblong pizza shaped like a northeastern state. I want a circle, because that's, to me, that's what a pizza should look like. So notice I'm letting the bottom of its weight rest on the board as I turn it around, so it's not getting all stretched out of position. And I'm also feeling for how tense it is. If you find yourself really fighting against this dough, like you're pulling it and it's just bouncing back and pulling it and bouncing back, and it's like trying to stretch a rubber band, it's okay, leave it alone. Put it back, cover it up again, come back in about 10 or 15 minutes. You know, all this working of the dough creates tension. All right, now we got something going here. Now let's put a little more flour on it. Right? We really don't want it to get sticky because it'll stick to our hands. And now we're going to pick it up and do the same thing and just let it hang down. And notice I am working pretty quickly, right? We don't want this pizza hanging in any one position for too long. And as you get coming around, you're going to notice that some of the parts are thinner and some of the parts are thicker. When it's thinner, don't stretch it too much. When it's thicker, stretch it more. Now we've got something starting to look like a beret. Right? First we started with a ball, then we had a puck. Now we have a little beret. I need a little more flour. And I'm gonna put it on my hands. I'm gonna get it on the back of my hands. Why are you putting it on the back of your hands? Well, we're gonna start using the back of our hands as a little resting space. If you've ever seen my matzah video, you'll recognize this technique. what I'm doing, let me show you what I'm doing, is I've got the dough over and I'm going like this. I'm stretching it like that. And it makes a dome. I've always got a dome. And as it's going around, I grab one little end and I pull. And I rotate and pull and rotate and pull. And that way, do you see that little movement? Flip, flip, right? There's no like yanking it up and letting it hang. Trying to keep supported in the center at all times. Is that how the professionals do it? No. Am I professional? No. Right? This is how I know how to do it. And it's getting pretty good, right? And now what I'm doing is I'm starting to get my fingers under the very edge and stretch it out. Oh, and we're starting to getting the pizza. Gosh, I love pizza. Who doesn't love pizza? If you don't love pizza, man, I don't know. I don't trust you. If you don't like pizza or garlic, right? All right, now how are we doing? This is good. So what size are we aiming for? Well, this is a 3/4 of a pound piece of dough, and that's gonna make reliably a 12-inch pizza. You wanna get your ruler out and measure? Be my guest. I don't do that. You pretty much know when it's as big as it's gonna get. Now I wanna show you something. See the light coming through? See how in certain areas you can almost see through it? That's something we call window pane. It's a sign of a very well-developed dough. It's a sign of a dough that is strong enough to get quite thin without breaking. Now, we might break this dough. Still might happen. And if it does, it's not going to be the end of the world. I'll show you what we do. If we rip it, you just shove it back together and pinch it. It's going to be covered up with cheese and topping. No one's going to know, right? You're going to be like, oh, you ripped your pizza right there. So now we're really getting somewhere. Look at how beautiful and stretchy this dough is. And this is sort of where the pizzaiolos do it, right? They get it between their two and they stretch it around. Okay, that's about all the riskiness I'm going to go through because I'm going to mess up this pizza if I keep acting like I know what I'm doing when I don't. So, but sometimes you got to try those techniques, right? I'm not really good at that kind of thing, but someday I'm going to be. Someday I'm going to be one of those guys who can just pick up a pizza and toss it around in their hand and do that thing that I was trying to do. And if you don't try it, if you don't try that technique, you'll never learn how to do it. And if you mess up your pizza dough, well, guess what? Oh, well, you'll make some more. And maybe your family will be hungry and disappointed that night. And you know what? Too bad. Let them make their own pizza. So look at that. We did it. We made a pizza. And by we, I mean me. So now what? Okay, well now we got a little issue here, right? If we put all our toppings on it now, we're not going to be able to get it in the oven. So that means we got to go get a peel. All right, so a peel is a great thing to have in your baking lab. And all a peel is a big flat paddle of wood, and it's got a thin edge so that when you put the pizza on it, and you can just slide it right off onto the stone.
If you don't have a peel, don't worry. You can use a cookie sheet. Just turn it upside down and put some parchment paper on top of it. Put the pizza on that, and when it's time to bake, slide both the parchment and the pizza onto the stone. It'll work just fine.
Cornmeal is one of my favorite releases to use with a pizza because it works really well, first of all. We're just going to scatter it on. And it's got a wonderful sweet aroma. This cornmeal is going to brown and in some cases actually burn, and that's okay, under the pizza. But it's going to give the pizza this crunchy, sort of sweet, corny note on the bottom. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put this pizza on the cornmeal. And again, remember, so we're going to flip it, turn it, and then lay it down. I got it stuck to itself. Oh, well. There it is, unstuck. See, you make these mistakes, but they're not the end of the world. Pizza's pretty forgiving. In the end, only a tiny little bit's going to be visible. And I'm going to re-stretch it a little bit. Just let's get it as big as we can get it, right? Big as we can get it. Is it perfectly round? No, it is not. So I'm going to go get my toppings. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this cheese, I'm going to mix it all up. It's a lot of cheese. Might be too much cheese. We're gonna find out. I know some of you are like, what's too much cheese? So what I do is I mound it up in the middle and then spread it out. Be careful not to put your toppings all the way to the end. There's a reason for this. One, you don't want it spilling out over the edge and onto your baking stone and smoking and smelling and making it hard for you to get the pizza back out of the oven. But even more importantly, wherever the toppings are, the pizza is going to stay really thin. And we want that crust around the edge to rise up and bubble and brown and have that wonderful crust at the edge of a pizza. So leave about an inch, right? Maybe less, maybe half an inch. You can see about what I did there, right? Now let's put our other toppings on. Let's start with the things that are going to be pretty wet. These mushrooms are going to be pretty wet. When the heat hits them and they start to roast, they're going to give up a lot of water. So we don't want them on top of other things, right? We want that water to go down into the cheese and get absorbed by the cheese. And that's it. And you know what? If you cut too much toppings, looks like I got too much mushrooms here, don't feel the need to shove it all on there. You don't want a big steamy, gloppy pizza, right? You want your pizza to have a little breathing room between the cheese and the toppings. I'm going to go all the way around there. Next, I'm going to put on my rosemary. Now look at my rosemary, right? It's kind of chunky. It's not like all a bunch of middle or little leaves. And we're not going to just, I'm going to just shove it around here. I'm going to shove it down in there. And what that's going to do is that's going to get the rosemary flavor into the dough and into the toppings near it. And then, oh, I got a little more asparagus. A little more asparagus, that's all right. And then we've got our garlic. I'm going to take my finger and smear it around in the oil a little bit. Just take a little thing and plop. And this goes on the top. And what's great about this is the oil in the garlic. Not only did it prevent it from browning while we were futzing around with our dough, but that oil is going to help that garlic fry in the hot air of the oven. And when you bite in to that fried garlic, that crunchy garlic, oh my God, your eyes are going to roll back. And then look at this, we got a little oil here. Don't waste that. It's full of garlic juice. Pour that around. All right. Wipe my hands off so I don't get oil on my peel. Now we want to test the release, right? Check that out. See as I shuffle it back and forth like that? You see how the pizza moves? That means it's going to come out. Let's get it in the oven. All right, all the work's about to pay off. Let's get her in there. I'm gonna put her in, get her far enough back so she lands right in the middle of the stove, and pull back. Easy as pizza pie. This is gonna cook really fast. We're gonna keep an eye on it. We're gonna look in on it in about 5 minutes. She's done when the crust is nice and brown, but not too dark. The cheese is bubbly, and the toppings are nicely roasted. Won't be long. Pizza take too long, not waiting. All right, let's check in. And oh, we're trucking along. Look at that big bubble. That's that dough rising beautifully because we didn't put the toppings right up to the edge. Cheese is melting nicely and bubbling and sizzling, but we got a ways to go. It's still kind of pale and the toppings aren't quite cooked. So we're gonna give it another, let's see, that was about 4 or 5 minutes. Let's check in on another 2 or 3 minutes. You don't want to keep the door open too often, but you do want to keep an eye on this thing. Probably 10 minutes is going to be the max. All right, I think we're about there. And in fact, we are. Some people like crust a little darker than that, but my sweetie pie does not. So it's time to pull it. Now you see, here's my big peel. It's so easy to use this. You just go, and you got your pizza. But not everybody has that. So let's show you what you do if you don't have that. These are nice. You can use 2 spatula and you put them on underneath and you bring them out, right? Now, while it's hot is the time to put the finishing touch on it. I like to take a little bit of olive oil. This is not the garlic oil we had before. That's a little too acrid for this use for me. I take a little brush. You can also use a paper towel or just drizzle it on. And what I like to do is paint a little olive oil onto the crust. It's not going to make it soggy, but it's going to make it, how we say, delicious. Well, I did say finishing touch, but I have one more finishing touch, which is one of the things that my lovely Lori loves the most in life, which is truffle oil. I think truffle oil goes beautifully with the strong cheeses and the asparagus. You just want to drizzle a little on, and the heat of the pizza is going to make it really fragrant. That is a thing of beauty. So we're going to get our pizza cutter. And cutting a pizza like this is really simple. You start, you put it on top of the crust, down, and across. So down, and across. Ow, it's hot. Down, and across. And we'll, even though sometimes I do 6 cuts, this time I'll do 8. And let's see how we did. We're gonna open that up. First of all, listen to that. That's a nice crispy bottom. And look at how beautifully the dough has risen. Got all those nice holes. Let's take a look at one of the biggest holes, right? This is really, look at that. That's gorgeous. And then our cornmeal bottom, perfectly roasted. And that's it. Serve that up with a beautiful crunchy salad. And have yourself a glass of wine or a glass of beer or something. Oh my God, it's even too hot to eat. I'm gonna eat it. Cut. Hey everybody, Charles here at the LA Bread Lab, and this week we're going to talk about a food that everybody loves, and that food.
Walk away and take a deep breath.
Pizza is not just something that the family loves and that the kids love, but it's this giant bear that wanders into your backyard and makes you forget what you're going to say. So.
And go.
Pizza good! Extra virgin olive oil. I know a lot of people say it doesn't matter to use extra virgin olive oil when you're
Good.
Alright.
Go.
Pizza is made out of only a few ingredients, and it's really straightforward. For this recipe, we're going to use 783 grams of blood.
Come on, get it all out.
That's Cameron. Okay. I really recommend you get yourself a pizza stone or a baking stone. You can get them at, you know, homeware, All right, so we need 8 grams of salt. That's pretty easy to do.